What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Money Codes. My name is Joel. So let's jump into this. I want to talk about the Capital One acquisition of Discover. This is a $35 billion merger. This is humongous. And maybe you guys have seen this in the headlines, but I really want to talk about how this is going to impact you. Because if you're somebody who's a debit card holder, if you travel a lot, right? If you are a small business owner, there are a lot of things you need to be very mindful of now that this merger has already taken place. So let's jump into it. Right now, Capital One is a bigger player than Chase. That is huge, right? That is huge. So who is going to get impacted from this? Let's go over this because I have a couple of Capital One cards. I have the Capital One Business Spark card. Does that mean I'm going to get a new Spark card? Not yet, right? Not yet. So let's go over this right now. You can see who's actually affected. So number one, if you have the 360 checking debit card, right, they are already in the process of sending out those card holders new debit cards. Some of you guys watching, you may have gotten it in the mail already. Some of you got it in the mail and you didn't even know what the heck was going on, right? It's legitimate. 360 checking debit card holders, you guys are getting new cards. Money Teen Debit, you guys are also getting new cards. That's going to be in the mail. Again, this has already been in the process. Some of you guys have already been receiving them, right? What about the venture cards, Quicksilver, Spark cards, like I mentioned before? Those credit cards, as of right now, you guys can just hold on to your existing credit cards. There's not going to be anything that changes. So what does that mean for those that are getting new cards? That means what I want you to do before you go ahead and you activate your new cards, I want you to do a few things. I want you to list every auto pay today, right? Whether it be Netflix, your gym, membership, phone bill, Comcast, Xfinity, whatever. Any account right now that has your debit card, right? 360 checking debit or your Money Teen Debit, any account that has that on auto bill pay, you need to write that down, keep track of it, because once you activate the new card, your old card is going to die, which means if they still have your old debit card on file and they're still trying to charge it and they don't have your new credit card, guess what? You just got declined. And if your debit card is associated with something that's incredibly important, like your light bill, cable bill, right, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So what I want you guys to do is to set an hour aside to update all of those accounts. It's annoying, but trust me, it's more annoying if you don't do it. You get declines and some of these accounts start reporting you late, right? And then you're going to be asking me for dispute letters, right? Just let's be proactive. So if you have a credit card, there's a 1 in 6 chance it's a Capital One card, right? They are slowly taking over the market. And not only are they the credit card issuer, they're also the cash register. And I want to explain what that means, because now that they've acquired Discover wasn't only a credit card, they were also a network, which means when you swipe your card, right, you know, when you go to certain stores, they say something like, oh, we accept Visa, we accept MasterCard, we accept American Express, we accept Discover. That's the network. When you swipe, that's the network that the transaction runs off of. Now that Capital One has Discover, they are the credit card issuer and they control the network, which means they get paid twice now every time you swipe your card, right? This is pretty crazy. That means that now Capital One can now set the interest rate standards. They can have better control over approval criteria. They can keep the network fees now to themselves, right? Because now they own the network. And this is less competition overall, right? Is this going to be a good or bad thing for the consumer? There's been a lot of back and forth on whether or not this is actually going to be something that's consumer friendly, this acquisition, right? Who knows how it's going to be, but again, this is why we want to at least discuss it. Let's go over like how could this possibly affect us. All right, so now the subprime truth. So Capital One now controls about 30% of credit cards for people that are in the rebuilding stage. So in other words, if you are a subprime consumer, which means your credit score is probably 640, 650, 660 and below, right? Let's just say 650 and below. You're considered a subprime consumer, which means you're more risky in the eyes of the bank, right? If your credit score is 750, 760, 800 plus, it's because you were, paying your bills on time, you have history. There's a whole lot of different things that played a part in you having a good 3-digit FICO score. So they're going to trust you more. That's basically how it works. If you have a lower score, you are more risky. Now, Capital One, they are now controlling 30% of the risky credit card holders in America. So who's usually in the subprime market? Again, if your scores are mid sixes and below, medical debt has hampered you, got divorced, and now you're rebuilding your credit. Maybe you're fresh out of college, high school, you're pretty young. 40% more likely. So Black and Latino families, right? A lot of us, we are going to be considered in that subprime market. So Capital One, once again, they're going to have a stranglehold on this market. And that means if you're somebody you're trying to rebuild your credit, the options that you had previously, they're now smaller, right? Because if you're somebody that's trying to build their credit, there's only so many places that you could have gone. First Premier is one. I've mentioned several times why you should avoid First Premier. Credit One as well. Like all of these subprime cards, I call them predatory because there's a whole bunch of fees that come along with it. Monthly fees, annual fees. Just, you want to stay clear from them. Capital One is really going to be the place to go if you're somebody looking to build credit, because now they have Discover. So that's one less, competitor, right? Remember the Discover It card. That was a card that I told you guys was a great option if you're looking to rebuild your credit, or if you have a thin or no credit profile. That's a great card. But now guess what? Capital One owns them too. So now that Capital One has a strong hold on this subprime market, what is that going to mean for competition, right? Because competition is always good for the consumer, but if one player starts to have more and more control over the market, at least part of this subsection, is that a good or bad thing for us long term? We don't know. We got to figure that out. So what about the people that travel, whether you're traveling for vacation, traveling for work internationally? Right now, there are 70 million locations that right now, if you take out your Discover, they'll accept. Compare that with Visa. There are almost double, 130 million. There's almost double the amount of locations that will accept Visa as opposed to Discover. So now you have to be mindful of that. If you only have, let's say, a Discover debit card, and that is your primary way of making purchases, buying gas, traveling, rental cars, whatever you're trying to do, you got to be mindful now that there are less places that are going to accept that Discover card. So what do you want to do? You want to have at least one backup card that is at least a Visa or a MasterCard, right? Because you don't want to have only one card. It's a Discover, and now there's fewer places where you can go to use them. You want to be flexible, and those that are looking to utilize international ATMs, look at Charles Schwab's Debit. It refunds all ATM fees worldwide, and they use Visa, right? So these are some options you need to keep in the back of your head. So let's look at the gap zones, right? So if you're traveling to Africa a lot, that's going to be a problem. If you're a Discover card holder, a lot of places in rural Europe, that's going to be an issue. They may not accept Discover. Some Tokyo train stations, right, in Japan, you might be out of luck. This is what I mean. So if you're somebody that travels a lot, keep in mind, if you love your Discover card, keep that with you, but always have at least a Visa or a MasterCard. So now we talked about this before with how Capital One, they found a legal way to potentially double their swipe fees. So let's look at that. 10 cents more per swipe times billions of transactions equals hundreds of millions of dollars extra, right? So when I said, if you ever looked at some of these locations where they say they don't accept MasterCard or they don't accept, this card, it's because if you are a business owner In order to accept a customer's credit card, when they swipe, right, the business, they have to pay a fee to the network, right? So when you go to this restaurant or when you go to the store, it's a local mom and pop store, you are buying some of your stuff, right? It comes up to $20 and you swipe the $20 that you swiped on your card. All $20 does not go to that mom and pop business owner. They have to pay Discover, right? They have to pay Visa. They have to take a certain percentage and what they call interchange fees. And there's all sorts of fees that the mom and pop store owner has to pay. It doesn't all go into their pocket. So now that Capital One has Discover, Capital One is going to get paid every time the consumer swipes, right? Normally. And then now they get to determine how much the mom and pop store owner has to pay every time somebody uses a Discover credit card or debit card, right? I think I did a video that goes into this in way more in depth, but basically this is a way for Capital One to essentially double dip. What does that mean when they have so much control, right? Are they going to be greedy? So some people are speculating now that Capital One is going to get more money because now they have Discover Network and they're going to get paid off of that. That means they're going to be able to spread that wealth, right, to the consumers by offering, better credit card rewards and incentives and things like that. That might be the case, or they might just put it in their pocket. Again, who knows? This is speculation. But again, these are things that I want you guys to think about when you see these headlines. This is what it means, right? Some of you guys think like, okay, I'm just getting a new debit card and that's just it. Not really, because it's going to impact so many little things. It could potentially impact the price that your local mom and pop store prices their merchandise, because if Capital One / Discover decides to increase the price, now they have to increase the price of the bag of chips or whatever in order to offset that cost. So it could potentially cost the consumer more money. Who knows, right? This is speculation, but I want you guys to think about when you see these headlines, how can this really impact you, right? So for my credit builders out there, I know a lot of you guys are still in the process of building your credit profiles. What you guys can do, right? Because technically speaking, even though the acquisition happened, you can still get the Discover It secured and the Capital One Platinum secured card, 2 separate cards. Put $200 on each one and put something like Netflix, YouTube, or whatever that you normally charge on each one, so that there's some usage, right? You're using the card. And within usually 6 to 12 months, I know it says 8 here, but usually 6 to 12 months, that Discover card is going to graduate. And the Capital One card, usually within about 12 to 24 months, that's going to graduate as well, which means the money that you put down to get the secure card is going to go back to you. Now it's an unsecured graduated card and you can use it freely. But this is not going to last forever. So until about early 2026, they're still technically separate for banking rules. So I want you to think of it like getting 2 phone numbers from what will be the same carrier. But once they merge officially, this double dip strategy is not going to be effective. All right, so we already talked about how this is going to impact the local community, so I don't have to go over that. I want you guys to check your cards, check all of the accounts that you are currently paying with your Capital One cards. And before you activate that new debit card, make sure you have tracked all of the accounts that are about to pull it out. You update that, because I do not want you guys to get any declines, right? Do not get declined because you activated your debit card and you forgot to update that in the necessary accounts. So that's pretty much it, guys. Hopefully you got a couple of gems from this. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification. I'll check you guys out in the next video. All right, have a good one. Peace.